welcome to the first episode of License to Chill podcast. This is a mental health podcast where I talk about my journey with anxiety and depression and all the tools and techniques that help me cope with it without any medications for years and help you understand the differences between anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and accept them so easily throughout your daily life. A healthy life means you're physically, mentally, and socially healthy. So this is just a small gift from you to yourself for a better mental state. We all go through so much stress during our days, so let me help you ease through them together. My name is Negin Azodi. I'm a 25-year-old woman who just graduated from nursing school, and I'm going to be your host for this podcast. For the first episode, I decided to firstly talk about myself, my journey, and my story with anxiety and depression, so you know how the whole story started. I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder right before lovely COVID entered the world and screwed up our lives. At that time, I was a second-year nursing student, working part-time at Starbucks at the busiest store of Budapest, studying, working, university, no sleep, and repeat. Until one day, my body had enough. It was on 2nd of October 2019. After a week of no sleep, not enough food, constant classes, work, I just decided to have a 15-minute nap on a super uncomfortable university couch. And I remember when I woke up, the colors were different. The sounds were definitely different. It was as if my whole sensory system had a server mix-up. I kept telling my friends, wasn't this yellow color brighter? Do you also hear voices around us as if listening behind a glass door? I remember this didn't feel like this when I touched it before. Did the material change? I felt so weird. I know I just took a fucking 15-minute nap, but come on, am I hallucinating or what? And my friends' answers were all so similar. Negin, you're tired, go home, sleep. And since we were all healthcare students, we had to diagnose ourselves. So everybody were like, oh, maybe your blood pressure is low, maybe your blood sugar is low, maybe this, maybe that. Anyways, I listened to them. I canceled my PE class and went home. And then, from then on, all of my nights were the same. I would be horrified of being alone because it would feel like I'm dying. I was fine if I was around people, if I was around my friends, but the moment that I was alone, I would feel like I'm fucking dying. And slowly that feeling became constant, and not only at work, but a permanent issue in my life. I couldn't work, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't even take a shower alone. If I wanted to take a shower, I would literally call one of my friends, make them sit down in my house so that I can take a shower, because I was so sure that I'm gonna fall in the shower because I'm dizzy and that I'm gonna die. But since I live alone, I thought, okay, at least I would have someone in my house. When I die, that person can help me. And also in the shower, I would have to sit down, hold tight onto something, and then take a shower. And yeah, and then slowly my other symptoms began. I would feel like whenever I went to a doctor and I wanted to describe my symptoms, I would describe it like I'm on a boat and I'm out of balance because of the waves. So it feels like the ground beneath me is constantly moving. That was like the best way I could have described it, to be honest with you, because every time I wanted to move, I would have to like hold on to something because I was like so out of balance. And then eventually my arm started going numb at nights, my legs would go numb, or I kid you not, one time I wanted to go pee and I realized my vagina is numb. Like I don't know how to describe it. Like I know that usually you don't feel it when you're like peeing, or maybe you do, like you don't pay attention to it. But at that moment it was, you know, when your leg falls asleep or your hand falls asleep, it felt like my vagina fell asleep. And my heart would pound in my chest so hard that so I'm Iranian, and in Farsi we say my heart is beating in my mouth. And honestly, it's such a perfect description for what I was feeling. And most of the times I would believe that if I move, I will faint. Like my brain would definitely make me believe that I will faint and then I will die because I'm alone. And then I started feeling like someone is sitting on my chest, like I could breathe, but I couldn't breathe perfectly. So I would focus so much on my breathing that would make me even more dizzy. And because of all of this, I just decided not to move anymore. Not even go to eat or drink, because if I get up, I will die. So I would just limit my daily activities to dragging myself to work, dragging myself to university, because the moment that I was around people, I was totally fine. Sometimes I would get the feelings, but then I would think like maybe my blood sugar is low. So I had this pack of salt in my bag and I would start like eating salt because I thought like, okay, my blood pressure is low. This will help, you know, make me feel better. At that time, I was in a serious long distance relationship, so whenever I felt like I'm dying alone, I would contact my boyfriend. And he would either not pick up, like it would be sleeping or anything, or when he did, he would tell me that it's all in your head. Come on. But just FYI, if you have anyone telling you these things, please don't tell them it's all in your head, because that's the last thing that we would want to hear, because that makes us feel like you're telling us you're crazy. Anyways, so I would call my friends, call my dad, call someone, because I constantly felt like if I'm on the phone with someone, I won't die. At some point I realized, okay, it's been a month that I'm feeling like this. So I booked an appointment with my GP and I asked her to give me some blood tests just to like examine me for any diseases. And my blood test came back and it showed that I'm perfectly healthy. But my GP said just in case, she would refer me to a neurologist. I went to the neurologist examined me, and he said that my symptoms are the symptoms of a person who has thrombosis, which means blood clots, or a tumor. Just, you know, he said it so casually, as if like he just said like, yeah, you might be having diarrhea. And he said like, to be sure, we need MRI. But the MRI's waiting list is in 1 month and it's so expensive and my insurance won't cover it. So I should just wait for 1 month and figure it out with my insurance and all that. And at that time, I was going to go to Amsterdam with my boyfriend and his friends. And for that, he prescribed me a Xanax. So I hate taking pills, but Xanax is gonna help me, then Xanax gonna help me. So I went to Amsterdam high on Xanax with my boyfriend and his friends, and knowing that, you know, nothing too serious, but I might have a brain tumor, but we won't know if I'm alive in 1 month. We'll get an MRI and we'll figure it out. During the vacation, I would cry. Like, I would have a fucking mental breakdown in every public bathroom. And then I would put on my makeup back on and then go sit at the table like nothing was up. But there were times that I couldn't actually like hide it. So I would actually have like a mental breakdown outside, and then I would have like a really huge fight with my boyfriend out in public. He would scream, I would scream, and then he would tell me to then like go home and they would go party. Maybe I'm tired and all that. And then I would tell him that I can't go home because I will die if I go home. And this is like even worse because I'm in Amsterdam and I'm in a country with, you know, with people that I don't know, and like, you know, in a country that I've never lived and stuff. And I would rather not die on this vacation. So he would call me crazy. He would tell me that I'm over exaggerating, that I'm ruining this for him, blah, blah, blah. We're not here to talk about him. Anyways, on our way back at the airport, we were late for the flight only because my legs were frozen and I couldn't walk towards the gate to board because I was so sure that I will die on that plane. I don't know if you guys have watched Rain Man. If you haven't, definitely suggest this movie. Amazing. It's with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. But there is an airport scene. It's a very famous scene. And it resembles my situation. But Dustin Hoffman plays an autistic boy in this scene. And I know that he plays an autistic boy, but at that moment, it felt like I was acting like an autistic child. I've been on planes my entire life. Like, I practically lived on planes. Why was I suddenly so afraid of them? So maybe my intuition is telling me something. Maybe, you know, the sixth sense and all that crap. So my boyfriend would scream at me, and of course that didn't make things easier, and I cried until the Xanax kicked in because I was so sure that I'm gonna die on that plane. So my body was rejecting the fact that, you know, I should get on that plane. So I cried and cried and cried, and we screamed and all that, and they called our names and all that until the Xanax kicked in and I was high enough to go on board. So when we came back, basically, you need to know, I never ask for help. Like, never, ever. Like, I always felt like asking for help makes me look weak. And the last time my parents saw me crying before this, asking for something, was when I was a kid and I wanted a Barbie doll. But I couldn't have it, and I would just like cry for it. And at this time, when we went back and I was alone, and every night I felt like I'm dying, I felt like I can't do this anymore. So my last visit to the doctor, I sat at the hospital floor because I got lost in the hospital and I felt like I'm gonna die. So I just sat there. I sat there for hours and I cried. It was just like, you know, I felt like I'm gonna die, and I felt like my life is just falling apart, and I felt like, oh my God, you know, by MRIs in a few days and all that, I decided to finally give up, call my parents and tell them I cannot do this anymore. And so I did. I called them, and my dad bought a ticket and flew in a week to save me. And I'm so grateful for that because he saved my life. He would literally walk me to the university, sit there for hours for my classes to finish, and then walk me back. Like, you know what you do with a kindergartner? That was me at the age of like 20 something at university. Full grown ass woman. But I couldn't be alone. I couldn't walk alone in the trams and stuff. Like, it was definitely not possible anymore. I had the MRI, and the MRI came out pretty fine, but I wasn't feeling fine. So we started seeing every specialist you can name in the medical field. And they did every test that is out there, and all of them were negative. So the doctors would literally come up to me and be like, oh, but you're fine. Everything is fine. Thankfully, this was negative. Thankfully, that was negative. But why don't I feel fine? Like, I felt like this is not a good news for me. Like, I literally didn't feel happy with every negative answer that I got. I didn't feel happy about it. I was supposed to, because that sounded like I'm healthy, but I didn't feel like I was healthy. And no one knew. Everybody were like, maybe you're burned out. Start meditating. Do this, do that. And I was like, you don't get it. I literally feel like I'm dying. Something is out there. And this is not the first time that the doctors don't find something, and then years later it turns out to be cancer, it turns out to be something else. So I was so sure it's just a malfunction from their side. Until, days pass by, I'm just going through my mental breakdowns as usual. And my aunt, who's a psychotherapist, told me that I have anxiety disorder and depression. And I literally remember I asked her, are you calling me crazy? And she said, no, I'm not saying it's all in your head. I'm saying it's hard, but it's okay. You just need psychological help and you will be fine. And I was like, fine? I'm going to die. How am I supposed to feel fine? How am I going to be fine? Because at that time, you see, my best friend, who I'm dedicating this whole podcast to, she was suffering from depression, from clinical depression, severe clinical depression, and she passed away at the age of 19. She did have cancer before, and the depression was caused by cancer treatments. But to me, it was like depression means death, and I'm not ready for death. So I went into a full denial mode. And I didn't want to accept that my problem has something to do with my brain. It's so scary to me, because at least it was scary for me, because you see, it's very common. Like, physical diseases are well known and they're common, there are like bigger and easier explanations for them than psychological disorders. Because like, when you have a disease that is like physiological, that like you can feel the pain, and then you go to a specific doctor, and then the specific doctor gives you a sort of like medication that can help with it. So since the society and the world and everything like talks about them more, to me it sounded like, I would rather have that than deal with a whole other universe, because our brains are a whole other universe. And I even remember that in anatomy class, I always hated the part with the brain. I remember before I started my nursing school, I was studying at pre-medicine program, and I had to study the brain. And it took me like 8 hours to finish just like the frontal part of our brains. And I was traumatized. I remember I went to my friend, and my friend took her like a week to finish the whole brain. And I went there and I was just like full on shock mode. And my friend was like, you just finished one part, didn't you? And I was like, what the fuck did I just read? And she was like, yep, just wait for it. You're going to be full on traumatized when you finish this whole thing. And so honestly, my brain in general became my biggest enemy. I was like, then I started nursing school and then I had to study anatomy, so it was like even more deep end the topic. And I always postponed the brain to the last part because I just like did not want to deal with it because it was too much. It was a whole other universe, and it's just so hard to understand that these things actually exist and how the brain works and with the neuron pathways and everything. I always hated it, like literally. So accepting the fact that my problem is not my body, it's my brain, was so hard. Like it was so hard because I had to accept that somehow my brain is right now my biggest enemy. Anyways, my dad stayed for 3 months and helped me pass my exams. I literally remember that I had hospital practices and I had to take them, right? Because I had like, I couldn't afford financially and time-wise to like get a passive semester or something. So I still wanted to like not quit and like go on. So I would go to my hospital practices and I would feel so dizzy. And there was this one time that I got so dizzy that I was talking to the patient, but then I realized that I'm facing the cabinet, like literally facing the cabinet, but I'm talking to the patient. And now it's like all a joke, but at that time it was so scary because it was so dizzy that I was talking to a full-on like closet cabinet. I'm just like talking to like a wooden thing, and I'm like, yeah, so you need to do this, you need to do that. And at the same time it was like, yo, the patient was like, yo, I'm here, you know? Anyways, I passed all of my exams. I passed my semester. I quit Starbucks because I couldn't work anymore. And just like, it was so funny because I was like at some point just standing in the line at the Louis Vuitton store, and I decided to apply for Louis Vuitton. And I got the job. I started working for Louis Vuitton. I passed the semesters, you know, passed the hospital practices and all that, and then left for Christmas with my boyfriend to Germany at his house. And his house was always so nice. His family felt like home, and like the whole place, I felt so safe there. But of course, I would still have my panic attacks, and I'd silently go to the bathroom, have my meltdowns, and come out and not tell anyone. I would tell everyone, I'm feeling a bit tired, I'm gonna go sleep earlier today. Because I didn't want people to worry about me. And when the holidays were over and I came back home, I was finally alone after months. You know, my dad was here, then he left, and I went to Germany, and I was with another family. But now I was alone. So of course, my anxiety kicked in and got worse and worse. And my aunt was a constant pressure on me, so she forced me to search for a therapist. At some point I was like, fine, you know what? I don't believe in therapy because why the fuck should I go to some stranger to listen to me, and then I have to see a psychiatrist, and then what, they act like they care, and then they give me some drugs, and then I have to get dependent on them, and all of that, like, it's gonna make me feel better? No, thank you. But as my symptoms worsened over time, I didn't care anymore. I was like, give me whatever that can help me. I just want to survive. I cannot do this anymore. So I found an English-speaking therapist in Budapest, and I have been seeing her for 3 years now. At first, she told me I need to see a psychiatrist. I gave him a shot, but I'm not the biggest fan of pills. I have some backgrounds, not me, but I have like a family relative, let's call it this way, that has some pill issues that made me even more panicked if I would take pills. So I didn't want my well-being to be dependent on a pill, so I stopped seeing the psychiatrist, and I told my psychologist that I want to learn and get the full power and control over my brain. And she told me, listen, it is possible, but it will be the hardest thing you'll ever get to do in your life. Like, she told me that your symptoms will get worse over time. You will have more panic attacks, your traumas will come up, and it's better to have some pill to help you get through it. But I was like, listen, I don't care. Like, all I need to know is that it's possible. And she said it is. And she was right though. It was freaking hard, but I did it. She first gave me a test when all of my symptoms were there, and I had to just it was like an anxiety ranking scale thing that I just had to check and click the boxes of all of the symptoms, and I'm not kidding. All of them, from numbing, from shooting pains, from the unbalanced feeling, from heart attack feelings, everything was there, which proved to me that I have anxiety disorder. So my aunt was right. So with my amazing luck, my anxiety attacks overlapped with 7 months of lockdown and me being stuck in a small studio apartment all by myself. It was amazing. At first, when COVID came, the Louis Vuitton store was open, so it was nice. I could actually work, and but then there was a lockdown, and thanks to COVID, I lost my job. Actually, Louis Vuitton was the best job I ever had, and so losing that kind of worsened my anxiety attacks and depression, and I felt like a failure, literally a failure. My boyfriend decided to fully leave and go back to his own country, and so I wasn't with him either, and I was alone. I was alone with myself, and before my anxiety kicked in, before I had problems with my anxiety, I was always there for myself. I was my biggest friend, and during my hard times, I would always look at myself in the mirror. I would hold my own hand, and I would tell myself that, listen, you have me. You're not alone. But when my anxiety kicked in, somehow I was my biggest enemy. So I didn't want to be alone with myself because I was so fucking afraid of myself. So I would get a minimum of 23 anxiety attacks per day, and it was just it was horrible. I don't know how to describe it, but it was horrible. And I was stuck in a loophole of no money, family drama, loneliness, anxiety attacks, no job, romantic relationship, which was turning into a dramatic one, and the pandemic that was killing everyone. My old friends who got the virus, then some of them got deported in Hungary, and they were going through PTSD, and I would keep hearing that people are dying all around the world from this, so I kept feeling that oh my god, all of my friends are gonna die, and I'm gonna die too if I get this. So in my head it was if I get the virus, either I'll die or get deported to either of the countries that I'm from, which I don't have a place to stay. Or I should go to Iran, which I don't know if nowadays you know what's going on in Iran or not, but it has always been this bad. And as a woman, I ran away from that country. So I was like, I don't want to go back. And so I was like, I don't know if dying is worse or being deported is worse at this point. And with the depression hitting, I wouldn't get out of bed. I would watch Netflix for weeks, order food, and had no activity. But then slowly I ran out of rom-coms to watch, series to rewatch, and I realized I do have an issue. And so I was going through a never-ending loop of anxiety attacks and suicidal thoughts that I would literally stare at my window, and I'm on the top floor, so I would stare at my window and think, what if I jump? Wouldn't it be easier? Because let's face it, it's just a second, no? It's just 1 second and then you're gone. So what if I jump? Or then I would see a knife and I would think, what if I cut myself? It's just a few seconds. I'll feel it, but then I'll get dizzy and then I'll go to sleep. No. Or I was out and I would see the tram coming and my brain would tell me, you should just jump in front of it. It's easy. It's just a split second. You won't even feel it. And I'm such an anti-suicide person because after my best friend passed away, I saw how it affected everyone. The hell with it. It still affects me. It still affects me until this fucking day to think that she left me. And I saw how it affected her family, her relatives, her friends, everyone else. So yes, it's easy. It's easy for us. But for a split second, I would think, oh, what about my family? I once had a near-death experience thing that I had this picture of when I'm dead and everyone is over my grave crying, and I was there and I kept telling them, like, I'm here, why are you crying? Like, all my loved ones were crying. And I was standing there telling them, like, why are you crying? I'm here, Jesus Christ. But they couldn't see me, and that was so painful. So when I would get the suicide thoughts, I would think, then I would have a flashback of that, and then I was like, it's not easy. It seems easy, but it's not. I cannot go through a minute of thinking of my mom suffering without me, of my dad feeling so depressed, of my dad suffering without me, of my brother, whom I love so much, suffering without his little sister. I couldn't go 1 minute without thinking of, like, you know, all of my best friends and all of them suffering without me. So yes, it's easier for me, but what about them? What about them? I cannot just leave them behind. And I'm not a quitter. You know, it's not in my attitude. I've been through hell in my life, but I never quit. So I remember one day I was on the floor and I was screaming because I had derealization kicking in and I was going nuts, and I got myself up. I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, and I told myself out loud that if you survive this, And at that time, it felt like, trust me, impossible to do so. But I told myself, if you survive this, if you actually survive every suicidal thought, every panic attack, all the derealization episodes, and come out of it stronger than ever, promise me one thing, that you won't let anyone else feel alone when they're going through this. Because every time I had my derealization, I would search on YouTube just to see if other people are going through derealization too or not. And it would bring me depersonalization, which we will go through all of this more, but depersonalization is more for like schizophrenic people. It's very different from derealization. Derealization is when you feel like everything is a dream. And there was nothing. Like, I felt like 7 billion people in this world. Am I the only one who's falling apart? I would go on social media and everybody had their life together. And I would feel like 7 billion people and the pandemic. Am I the only one who's having anxiety attacks? Am I the only one who's falling apart? Am I the only one with a set of symptoms that feels fucking ridiculous? And I felt so alone. But you know, when my best friend passed away, for months I hated her. And now I know I was going through grief stages, which we will again cover in the episodes. But I hated her for leaving me. I hated her for not fighting through. I felt like, how fucking selfish could you be? But only because I could never connect to her depression. I could never connect to her depression. But when I got my depression, when I got my anxiety attacks, when I had my suicidal thoughts, that was the closest I've ever felt to her. That was the moment I finally connected with my best friend. And I felt like how lonely she must have felt. How scared she must have felt. And then knowing that more than 90% of the world's population actually deals with anxiety and depression, and they all feel alone, I thought to myself, no, someone has to put an end to this show. And I thought, I will come out of this stronger than ever, and I will open a community for people not to feel alone anymore. For people so that when they search their symptoms, something comes up, some experience comes up, so they realize they're not the only ones. And also for people that they go through normal day-to-day stress and life problems and work problems and burnout and all that, for them to have a place to turn into, so that it prevents them from getting to a point when there is no help. And that is why I didn't stop. That is why I got myself back up and I told myself, it's hard, but we will get through this. So after 7 months, or even more, I think 9, I learned all the techniques, everything, and I gained the power over my brain to a point that right now, if you're talking to me and I have an anxiety attack at that moment, I have a panic attack, you won't know, because I know how to deal with it. And it's one of the biggest achievements of my life. and I've achieved many things, but I'm very proud of it. And I'm here with this community to give it to you and teach you how to do the same. And I'm very excited for the upcoming episodes. We're gonna have guests. I've worked with doctors, with nurses, with nutritionists, with so many people. I have many friends whom are doctors that actually told me they would love to be on the show. I've done many challenges, different techniques that are actually alternative medicine that I want to talk about it. But all in all, it's going to be a mental health community just to normalize anxiety, normalize mental breakdowns, because more than 90% of the world's population deals with anxiety and depression, and only 40% of them are accepting it, are getting the help that they need. The rest are either in denial or don't have the luxury to get help, but are in denial because society wants us to believe that if you have anxiety, if you have depression, then you're weak, then you're crazy, then you're sick, then you shouldn't be working, shouldn't be doing shit. But that's exactly what's wrong with it. That's why people are in denial. That's literally not that. When I started writing about my anxiety diary on my Instagram, when I started coming clean to people, when I started being real, I got many texts from many people that actually their lives looked so much well together. On Instagram, they texted me and they told me, thank you. Thank you for talking about it. Thank you. I have this symptoms too. I have this too. I have that too. And I thought about it and I thought, this is why. This is why no one wants to talk about it. Also because there were people, of course, that they texted me and they would tell me, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid that people would get a hand on your weak points and they would use it one day against you? And I would tell them, you think my anxiety is my weak point? You think, seriously, you think my anxiety and my depression is my weak point? No, it's not my weak point, because I'm surviving it, because I'm dealing with it and I survived it and I'm a survivor of it. So it's not my weak point. I actually count it as my strong suit and my weapon. You think you can fuck with me? Anxiety fuck with me and look where it got me. Like, come on. So this is my motto. This is my goal. And I'm more than excited to start this community, to have all of you help me make this community bigger and stronger. Thank you so much for listening to this first episode. And if you haven't followed us on Instagram, make sure to follow me. Make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. And yes, the Instagram's name is License to Chill Podcast. You can follow us and join your community for free, where I will be posting a lot of codes and a lot of strategies, different challenges and all that. And I am more than excited to talk with all of you in the upcoming episodes. Thank you so much for listening to this. And if you know any other person that needs this community, needs to listen to this podcast, please share them, share this, share the link, and help me, because yes, of course, this is my first podcast and I'm not a pro, but I have a dream, I have a talent, I have a skill, and I have good intentions on using it. So please help me make this community bigger. Thank you so much. With lots of love. Have a lovely week and weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye.